I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, August 14th, 2023, and the time is 6 p.m. Ben Miller is joining us remotely tonight, and as such, we will have any votes be roll call votes. Anita, will you count us present?
I will take attendance, so please respond present or here. Butler?
Here.
Coleman?
Here.
Gerwitz?
Here.
Gonzalez George?
Here.
Miller?
Here.
Nelson?
Here.
Quinnell?
Here.
Thank you. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Welcome to any members of the community here tonight to observe the important work being done on behalf of our school district stakeholders. Dr. Hillman, we have some items in the table file. Will you update us?
Yes, we have several items in the table file this evening. I want to call your attention to an updated slide deck for the Area Learning Center Continuous Improvement Plan that is in the table file, as well as a number of items in the consent agenda, including personnel items, appointments, increase, decrease, change in assignment. There's quite a few of those, and one resignation. I also do want to point out that there's an updated student citizenship handbook. There was one minor correction on page 12. There was both an asterisk indicating principal discretion and a 1 to 3 day suspension for a second instance of bullying in grades 6 through 8, and it should be just a 1 through 3 day suspension at that point. So we've corrected that in the table file.
Thank you very much. If there are no objections, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Jeff, second. Second by Amy, thank you. All those, Anita, would you like to
I would.
take a vote?
Butler?
Aye.
Coleman?
Aye.
Gerwitz?
Aye.
Gonzalez George?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Quinnell?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment? All right, then we'll move on to the next item, which is announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman?
Yes, I have several this evening. The first is 34 incoming 7th grade students had a successful trip to Eagle Bluff in July. And while at Eagle Bluff, the Northfield students won the Eagle Bluff Environmental Learning Center Eagle Eye Award for excellence in conserving our natural resources. Community Education thanks district staff Chris O'Neill, Paula Bargery, and Michael O'Keefe, parent chaperones Nancy Fox, Chris Walker, and Liz Beckius for assisting with the trip. So those 34 rising 7th graders had a great time at that Environmental Learning Center at Eagle Bluff. In our role as a charter school authorizer, I'm really happy to share that we're congratulating Arcadia Charter School as it celebrated its 20th anniversary last week. I had a chance to attend the festivities and there were quite a few people there. They had food trucks, they had music. It was really heartwarming to see people who go back to the beginning of the school. Teachers who had opened the school were there. It was a very celebratory environment, and they also were honoring the retirement, or I'm joking, the quote unquote retirement of Bob Gregory Bjorkland, who is a teacher there, also is the NHS theater director. We joke with Bob that we're not convinced he knows how to retire because he's still doing a little bit at Arcadia, and of course will still be directing the shows here at Northfield High School. So again, reminding people that Northfield Public Schools is one of only 2 traditional public school districts remaining in the state who go through the rigorous process of becoming a charter school authorizer. And we are really proud of Arcadia's first 2 decades and the great work that they do for kids each day. A couple of athletic related announcements. Fall athletics started today for our Raiders. You could feel the energy throughout the system. We wish everyone a successful fall season, of course, filled with growth and learning their sport, but also how to be gracious in both victory and defeat. And we know the importance that educational-based athletics play in students' development. We also want to congratulate several student athletes, Ben and Jake Geiger, Hunter Lawson and Oren Alexander, who are heading to the state bass fishing tournament September 9th and 10th, and to Ian Weimer and Taylor Stanford heading to the regional qualifier on August 13th. So this is, again, one of our more relatively new activities. It's something that takes place in the summer. It's the Northfield High School Raider bass fishing team. It's quite a fast growing sport in Minnesota, and Craig Johnson, the coach, and all the other folks who help out with that, we're so grateful that they give students that opportunity to participate in something they love and represent their high school at the same time. So congratulations to those student athletes in bass fishing. Moving on to the next level. A couple of other notes to share. The class of 1988 held their 35th reunion this past weekend, and I had the opportunity to give several members of that class a tour of Northfield High School. It was really interesting because some of them have not been back since the old pool was filled in. So they were very excited to see the weight room. Some of them, if you think about it, the M wing wasn't even constructed in 1988. So it was really heartwarming to tour these class of 1988 folks who were just so interested in regaling us with some really great stories, most of which I'm sure were true. So it was a great time hearing from them. And I know they had about at least 40 people who are registered to come to the event on Saturday. And we had a handful of people who took us up on the tours, but always great to see people come back to their hometowns, see their old school, and just to enjoy being with each other. And then finally this evening, we want to congratulate Director of Finance Val Murdersdorf, who is now published. She wrote a guest commentary for the Minnesota Society of Certified Public Accountants about the importance of offering multiple pathways to help people secure a CPA license, and really focusing on how the continued lack of licensed CPAs has an impact on school districts, their audits, and of course, even hiring people for district finance offices. So congratulations to Val on being published. Those are the announcements for this evening.
Excellent. Board members, do you have any announcements or other recognitions? Okay, we're on to item 5, which is our items for discussions and reports. And first up is Director of Community Education, Erin Bailey, will be presenting a progress report on the goals set for the 22-23 school year, as well as the new goals for the upcoming school year. Welcome, Erin.
Good evening, board members. Thanks for having me here. Let's make sure it gets pulled up. Did I break it already? Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm excited to share the school improvement plan for the Northfield Community Education Center. As you will see, this plan is tied to both to the district's strategic plan and the strategic commitments, with which of course you are all very familiar with. The NCEC school improvement plan does reflect a goal from each of the strategic commitment areas. When I start to talk through some of those, you'll see I've chose to highlight 3 of those areas, but those other 3 are all in the narrative that you have received. Of course, you are also familiar with the district benchmarks. While community education certainly touches each one of the district benchmarks, our school improvement plan will focus primarily on the 1st, 2nd, and 11th benchmark that you see here. As we start our 4th year at the Northfield Community Education Center, I am excited to share this plan, and whatever details aren't fully described during my presentation, you will see them in the narrative that was part of your board packet. So first, just some key reflections and highlights from last year. First, children are leaving the Northfield Community Education Center prepared for kindergarten. As you can see on the graph on the left, this is the fall 2022 STAR Early Literacy distribution. So these are the students who took the STAR Early Literacy test when they entered kindergarten this fall. The column on the left are the students at Early Ventures, which is our licensed birth to 5 childcare center in the NCEC. And the column on the right is the distribution for all students. What is really exciting is this is year number 2 in a row that all Early Venture students were ready for kindergarten as determined by the STAR Early Literacy distribution. Really exciting for staff all the way through that system, and a good recognition of the work that is happening there. The NCEC also serves diverse populations, and we'll talk about that more on the next slide. There also in the narrative, you saw that as well. Just the makeup of what students look like, both in our Early Ventures program and in our Hand in Hand preschool, with Hand in Hand preschool being a significantly more diverse program. And then partnerships serve an important role in meeting the needs of students, families, and staff. At the NCEC, we do house the Community Action Center food shelf and also the Early Childhood Navigators. And just some highlights from their work in this last year. So from July 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2023, there were 1,434 visits to the NCEC food shelf. That was from 289 unique households, and there were 54,208 pounds of food distributed from that food shelf. So just for reflection, they were able to be open one night a year this last week due to some staffing challenges. And the year before, they were opened on 2 different occasions and distributed approximately 63,000 pounds of food. So the times were cut in half and nearly the same amount of food was distributed. This food shelf is heavily used and heavily accessed and is a great resource to have in the building. Then for the Early Childhood Navigators, from July 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2023, those staff worked with 360 families with children ages 6 and under, and they reported 4,693 interactions with those families. Again, those navigators help to link families and children with preschool, childcare, county assistance paperwork, pathway paperwork, and other resources throughout the community. So again, very valuable partnerships to have within the NCEC. And then here is again some just reflections on the goals from last year. So this, the charts on the right highlight our Hand in Hand preschool program. So again, this is showing just the diversity in Hand in Hand preschool compared to the larger enrollment across the district. So the columns, the top column, it reflects the students in special education. And again, on the left, it would be a Hand in Hand preschool. On the right would be the district as a whole, the ethnicity breakdown and the free and reduced population breakdown. What in working with Hope Langston, the Director of Instructional Services, to help analyze this data, we do know that poverty is the largest predictor in determining whether a child is ready for kindergarten. And so we continue to try to provide supports to help children throughout that birth to 5 age range in being able to be ready for kindergarten. To get a little understanding of where we're at with our program, so Early Ventures, this is to say we're very full still at the NCEC. Early Ventures, we do not have an infant spot until at least June of 2024. And even if then, that would be determining if any of our current families were going to be enrolling a child at that point. There is also nothing available in any classroom beyond the infant room at this time. So we would need to have somebody move or unenroll from the program in order to be able to take another child in childcare at that site. In Hand preschool, we did add a section this year. So we've added a Tuesday, Thursday morning section. We do have a few openings in preschool, which is pretty common at this point in the year. I think it's about 10, and we probably will have those filled before the year starts, but we usually do have a couple of spots open at this point in the year. And this is again where the Early Childhood Navigators are very helpful in helping us reach to children that we may not know about or have had connections yet that would benefit enrolling in preschool. As we look to our school improvement plan goals for this year, as I mentioned, I'm going to highlight goals in the area of learner outcomes, people, and equity. And the goals in the area of communications, stewardship, and partnerships are included in the narrative. So Hand in Hand preschool holds the largest number of incoming kindergarten students by a significant amount. When you add Early Ventures to that too, the programs out of the NCEC are producing the largest amount of students that are entering into kindergarten. So when we analyzed the data from the STAR Early Literacy Screener about what skills kindergartners were entering in the lowest areas, we then looked at those skills and chose what would be the equivalent in an early childhood setting to help do a better job of pre-teaching those skills in hopes of changing the outcome for the skills that were the lowest for all kindergarten students across the board on the STAR Early Literacy screener. So using that data was how we decided we will increase the number of hand-in-hand preschool students demonstrating proficiency in literacy, focusing on predicting what will happen next in the story, reciting songs and rhymes. In the area of people, we were very excited about the scores we received on the student parent survey, but we always want to strive for continued growth. And so we will again use that survey to increase our average score for I received positive phone calls, emails or notes about my child from school. So we are hoping to increase that by 0.1, which I know could seem insignificant. We also know from Studer when we reach a certain threshold, you hope to maintain or have very slight growth. So we're trying to increase that score to 4.68 or higher, which would be an increase of 0.1 from our survey results from this past year. And then for our equity goal, we are looking at our hand-in-hand preschool assessment for the Monday through Thursday afternoon students, which is 2 sections of 18 students each. And we would be looking to have students of color perform at or above the level of their white peers. So when we look at that data from last year, just so you have an understanding of what the difference in performance was, for those groups, it was 9% different in one and 11% different in the other classroom. And again, that was as determined by our early childhood assessment, which is approved by MDE. So our action steps for these goals. In learner outcomes, we do use the Haggerty curriculum in each of in our hand-in-hand preschool and early ventures classrooms that are the year before. In hand-in-hand, we use them in both the year and 2 years before kindergarten, and in early ventures, we use them the year before kindergarten. And this is the same curriculum that is also used in the elementary setting. It's just leveled differently for the pre-K setting. We will continue to use our conscious discipline rituals and rhymes in both hand-in-hand and early ventures. This we do on an ongoing basis, but also it helps produce that rhyming and knowledge of those songs. And then as we're able, we'll have reading corps members placed in classrooms. So we have currently hired 2 reading corps members for this upcoming year. We do have an opening for 1 more reading corps member, but these staff members can work with small groups of students and have produced significant outcomes in helping literacy for students that have had less exposure in their early pre-K years, and they've really helped with the growth in making students ready for kindergarten. For people, we will again, we're looking at having some contacts with families twice a year. We, instead of just in past years where we had just done a postcard, we've widened that a little. We've learned over the last couple of years, different families respond to different contacts in a little bit of different way. And we are aiming to have that first one done before October 15th, which is really to have had a positive contact with families before our fall family conferences happen, so that we've really set the groundwork of making sure we've connected with families between the time that we have the initial conferences at the end of August and before we have our family conferences in the fall. And then in the area of our equity goal, due to change in legislation, EL services will be available to early childhood special education students. And we will have our early childhood outreach specialists provide tier 2 support for students of color. Our early childhood outreach specialist is a bilingual staff member, and she also has significant contacts with families that are in our preschool program. And then for our progress on monitoring our plans, for our learner outcomes, we will assess students using the MDE approved preschool checklist at least 2 times per year. If a student is struggling, we do progress monitor and do a third check in the winter session if that is needed as well. For the people, we will of course measure the quarterly family contact totals, and then also we'll be making sure we have systems checks to make sure everyone has access to Seesaw or talking points and is connected throughout the school year, so that if some numbers change or contacts change, that we are making sure to stay on top of that, just to make sure we have the correct contact and the best way to communicate with families. And then in our equity goal, we will continue to review fall and spring assessment data and adjust our instructional strategies as needed. So with that, thank you. I'll remind you and hope that you've all received your fall brochure, which is in the middle picture here, and that registration is open. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Erin. That was terrific. Board members, do you have any questions or comments? Amy?
Thank you, Erin. It's always a pleasure to have you come speak to our group, and I'm always interested in what you're doing. I have two questions for you tonight. The first is, you talked about how there's no space in the childcare. Are you thinking of expanding the childcare? Is there demand out there? And what's happening along that line?
In Northfield, like probably everywhere in Minnesota right now, the demand for childcare is extreme. It is part of people's challenge in moving and working and finding places for their children to be cared for. So yes, we are reviewing how we could potentially expand childcare. For us to add a room, we need to be, it actually is probably looking at adding 5 rooms, because if you add an infant room, you have to be able to serve them all the way they get to kindergarten. And so we have to be a little strategic about when and where we add that spaces. Where we see the most demand for childcare, and which is true in Northfield, is in infants and toddlers. I'm betting we had 10 calls for toddler care this summer. And so that, knowing that that's where the pressure points are the greatest, that would be where we'd want to probably add first, but then we need to add classrooms all the way up in order to be able to serve those kids, so that it's not that they get care as a toddler and we have nowhere for them to go afterward. A little of the challenge right now is staffing. Why we could do some things in our building, we have to be able to provide quality staff to care for those kids, which is a significant challenge right now. While we are fully staffed at early ventures, when we look at our kid ventures, our school age care, we are in desperate need of more staff there prior to the start of school. And so trying to just balance when is the right time to make some of those decisions, and can we support what we would look at adding? Which didn't give you an actual answer of when, Amy, but I think that we don't know yet, but we continue to balance and monitor that, and, you know, continue to have conversations with the other childcare centers and home daycares in Northfield to know where openings are, so that when families do need help and need someone to care for the child, we know where to direct them.
And I think I ask you that question every year. So I always appreciate the update,
Mhm.
and I understand some of the complexities involved. And I know in the past you've talked about changing the ages
Mhm.
in the classes, so you could sort of wedge a couple of classes with intermediate ages in there. But
DHS, so the Department of Human Services, who provides our licensure for early ventures, does regulate which ages are in which classrooms. So infant can be from 6 weeks old till 16 to 19 months, depend on when they start walking. And then toddler can then be from that 16 to 19 month mark to 30 to 33 months. And then we start kind of measuring them out as to when they'll enter kindergarten. So whether they'll go in 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So we are a little bit, there are some, you can be licensed for so many in a room based on the number of staff, but the ages are pretty well prescribed of what age can be in that room.
I have another question for you. And that question is about our benchmark 11, which is, you have such a huge umbrella of things that you're responsible for. And I really am not trying to in any way say all of the things that you've said are very, very important, but there's so many other things that you're in charge of. And I'm wondering if you've given any thought to benchmark 11, since you're the only
We're the ones holding benchmark 11.
you are benchmark 11.
Yes.
And how you would expand possibly to some of the many other programs that you oversee.
Absolutely. I like to think of the school improvement plan as a snapshot, right? We can't put all the goals that we have across our whole school or department in there. And so we've kind of used the school improvement plan to focus on the actual building and the programs that are housed in there. We do annually have to submit a community education report to the Minnesota Department of Education. And that report is heavily focused on our recreation enrichment, drivers, the programs that we administer outside of the kind of preschool, childcare, ABE, so the community ed report is essentially looking at everything that doesn't happen inside our building, if that makes sense. And so annually we have to report on that, and we have to report on things that include the number of programs we offer in each of the different age groups. And so they bucket age groups. And so how many programs are we offering in each of those? That annual report also requires us to report on facility usage. And so how many facility users resided within our district versus outside of our district, how many hours did they each area use on an annual basis? And then we also have to reflect on our advisory councils. So how often did we meet? Who are the members? Who's the oversight of our program? So we've really used that report, which isn't in the school improvement plan, but that report to count toward, to track what we're doing towards goal number 11.
Okay, good to hear. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Amy. Great questions. I also had that question about staffing, so thanks so much. Anyone else? Mr. Clements, Corey.
Hi, Aaron. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. and
Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. I have two questions. The first is a follow-up to one of Amy's questions about capacity.
Mhm.
I think when people might hear, if they just hear that snapshot that we're at capacity and we're looking at growth, they may think we have a lot of students coming in, because that's been a discussion here at the board level for many years about enrollment size and birth rates. But we've had a tricky 3-4 years where daycare dynamics have changed. A lot of places have closed. You mentioned staffing. Do you have data that looks at how the number of spots in the county or in the city have changed over the last 5-10 years? I assume we're pretty steady because we've probably always been at capacity, but are other places shrinking their capacity, which makes it a bigger issue for us?
Yes, that's a great question, Corey. So we have recently done a study to see how many slots we do have available. I'm not going to be able to recall it off the top of my head, but I can send it to you. Because we do track that, and then we track that and a few of our partners, like the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, Childcare, where a few partners are also assist in this data. And so they track, based on what we have available and what would be needed if people, and they don't, and it's not assuming that everyone works. They have a percentage that they use to calculate this data based on how many parents potentially are in the workforce, thus requiring or needing childcare. So I can give you the count on what we have on that. When Smith, the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, did this study about 2 years ago, they thought the county was short about 400 slots. Now that's across, that's not just infant and toddlers, that would be across the age of care that is needed. What we track a little more loosely within Northfield is just the opening and closings of childcare centers. And so we have recently had a home daycare that has closed. They closed this summer. We did have one that's open in the NCRC space. So it's actually in the space that we used to be in. So they have kind of a childcare model that's working out of there. So we do track some of those things because, again, we want to be able to assist people if they're looking for childcare. But I can send you more data on exactly what the count is as far as what those that analyze this say what we need and what we have.
Sounds good. Thank you. Then my second question is concerning the goal for the coming fiscal year, or the current fiscal year as it is. You had mentioned that 0.1 of an increase from 4.68 is not insignificant, which I agree it's not, and that's a great goal to have. I'm curious if there have been other people goals that were considered as you put this together, because that's a phenomenal number. Obviously, we always want better year over year, but as you came to us and put this together, were there other considerations for that goal?
Yes, there were. And being very proud of the work that staff has done, that was actually our lowest rated area, which is why we chose that one. And so we did look at all of them and we did discuss them all and chose that one because that had the lowest score for feedback from parents of the list of questions. So that was how that one was selected.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Robert.
Thanks, Aaron. It's great seeing these numbers. The results of the parent survey, phenomenal numbers, particularly since this is many of our students' first engagement with the district, and having the families have that experience is wonderful. And then we couldn't ask for better kindergarten readiness scores for early ventures, and hand in hand considering the population we're serving. I have two questions. One around those hand-in-hand readiness scores. Considering that our population that we're serving at the NCEC is very different from the other preschools here in the community, how do those scores compare
Sure.
generally
Yep.
to?
That's a great question. So Hope Langston and I, the Director of Instructional Services, we in the spring do meet with we have a data sharing agreement with preschools and childcare centers. So at the end of the year, they send us our attendance data and we provide them cohort level student readiness data. So we come back to them and we say, based not individual scores, but based on your cohort, this is your makeup. And then this compared to the district's average. And so they, they vary widely. Some preschools are larger than others. Some have very different population makeup. I would say other preschools who have less diversity and are smaller score higher on the STAR early literacy. And we do share that data back with those preschools so that they can use it for their own learning, but we use it across the network. So if we know that a certain preschool or childcare center is really performing well in a certain area, we want to share that with everyone and learn from that. And so part of it, we're sharing with them to help guide their work and know what they're doing. And then we also share with them what the STAR early literacy test looks like, because if you're a preschool teacher, you may never get the opportunity to know how is this test administered in kindergarten and what does that look like for an incoming kindergarten student. But does that I can share without revealing what every childcare center scores are. They are the factors that contribute the most to school readiness. Poverty is across the board. So, I mean, if you are holding a higher level of students, that would be considered for free and reduced price lunch status, it is likely then lowered not likely, it has lowered scores of kindergarten readiness.
Thank you. And
Mhm.
that's helpful in providing context.
Sure.
I'm also wondering about our equity, the equity goal. Why is the afternoon Monday through
Sure.
Thursday class pulled out?
Great question. That is historically our most diverse class each year. And I'm not sure why but that tends to be where we see the most diversity. And this will be a goal across the board, but we want some class to measure. If that makes sense, we need some data points so that we can focus on that. We'll focus on it across the board, but kids come at varying schedules. And we didn't want to single out a class where you would potentially be able to tell in the data who a student or students are if it's a less diverse section of preschool. And so that tends to be our most diverse classes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great questions. Anyone else? Ben, do you have any
I'm-
questions? Anyone else?
I did have a quick one. Thanks, Aaron. Good presentation. Do we anticipate that there's any state funding coming out of this last legislative session that might help address some of the capacity issues that Amy was talking about? Any thoughts on that?
Kind of funding did he say? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the legislative funding that we know, so they have continued. So throughout COVID, our Early Ventures Childcare Center has received payments, as numerous childcare centers have to, they call them childcare stabilization grants. And those have continued to help support kind of the difference in what child cares are charging versus what the cost of care actually is. Those we know will continue on through December. It's a little unclear if they'll continue there, but they've gotten this transition period in there. So we know that will continue. Pathway 1 and 2 scholarships, which also support students in both hand-in-hand preschool and early ventures. They both have received increases in the number of amount of funds they will award to students too. So we also will see students who potentially a scholarship maybe didn't go all the way through the school year should now have no challenges with that going through the school year. And we'll have the ability for some students to access those scholarships younger. And there are some qualifiers that would make students automatically enrolled in that program now that were not there previously.
All right, thank you. So could we anticipate that because there might be more support that would increase demand for some of those services in the future? Is that a safe assumption? I mean, from
That's
your
safe.
perspective?
Yep, that is a safe assumption. And the other one I should mention is the Child Care Assistant Program, which is through the county. The CCAP program also increased their rates, essentially their payments to childcare providers, which is also very exciting news too. So this is really great. And not every center in Northfield accepts these payments. And so that's, yes, 2 places in Northfield accept these payments. And so while you'll see increased demand, the demand in this area is going to fall on the shoulders of 2 centers that are able to take these students. And so we will likely have more students that want to come, and we'll have to balance that need through these 2 centers.
Dr. Helming, you have some comments?
Yeah, I have a few comments. First, let's just take a moment and ponder the fact that the lowest score on the parent satisfaction survey that the NCEC received was 4.68 on a 5-point scale. I think that's due to Erin's remarkable leadership and the way that she brings her team to coalesce around these goals and relentless follow through. And we just have to stop for a moment and pause and say, wow, 4.68 out of 5 is your lowest. That's pretty awesome. And that is the whole spirit of continuous improvement, is we continue to try to make the best better. And then I want to take a moment to make a connection for the board and the community to go back to 2018 when we passed the elementary and early childhood center bond referendum. We had a vision. We explained that vision to the community. The community bought in. The vote that evening was a landslide. More than 60% of voters approved of that plan, which touched 5 different buildings. But the vision was really centered around learner outcomes, our learner outcome strategic commitment. Because when we talk about that commitment, which says we prepare every student to be academically and socially ready to choose their preferred pathway after high school graduation, that is not something that starts in 9th grade. It's not something that starts in 6th grade. It's not even something that starts in kindergarten. We had a vision of playing 2 different parts of academic improvement, one for the students who were in the system at the time, and another for those students who are yet to be in the K-12 system. Because what we know from research is that when we can close the gap, the academic gap that exists between students of color and white students when they enter K-12, if we can close that gap before they enter the K-12 system, we know we have an excellent chance of making sure that every student is proficient. And so the vision behind the Northfield Community Education Resource Center, or Community Education Center, is starting to be realized. You're seeing year after year, 100% of the students who participate in that childcare center are ready for kindergarten. That was exactly the vision that we had. It was delayed a bit because of the disruption of the pandemic, but you are starting to see the return on that investment already. And we have to manage the growth, because this is really looked at as one of the preeminent early childhood centers, not just in the community, but in all of southern Minnesota. And so we really are on the right track. Now it's about how do we manage the growth so we can deliver on what we promise. And I also want to make sure we make the connection that we do not leave any stone unturned. When Erin talks about the CCAP dollars, this was an irritation of mine several years ago when I learned that there were several $100,000 left on the table at the county because the process for securing those funds was very arduous for the people who needed it. As a result, Erin partnered with some community groups. We have these early childhood navigators who are able to help low-income families access this funding that was directed for them to be able to help them get high-quality childcare. And of all the different early learning centers in the community, only 2 go through the process of accepting those payments. And as you might imagine, there's a little bit of bureaucracy with it. So we have to be persistent. We have to follow through and make sure that we are connecting the dots for people. So this is a great report tonight. I'm on cloud 9 hearing it, but it's just going to keep getting better, because as these students matriculate through the system, we're going to see the results all the way through. And then we're going to achieve that strategic commitment of preparing every student to be academically and socially ready. So well done, Erin and the NCEC. And I'm just excited to see that vision that this board had back in 2018. You're really starting to see the fruits of it.
Wonderful. Okay, any other questions or comments from the board members? Okay, Amy?
I just have to ask, when will the play center be ready?
So the Play Center has a name now. It's called The Grove. Which ties into some of our other NCEC items. If you have been in our early childhood center, those rooms are named. There's the caterpillars, the bees, the butterflies, the ladybugs, and the fireflies. And then we have moved forward with the NCEC critters, a friendly little logo for our building as well. So the Grove now ties into that as well. When it will be fully done, Amy, is still is a little bit of a question. They are scheduled to install in the next 2 weeks the next large piece, which is essentially the last large piece to go in, along with some of the graphic design pieces and also kind of the trees and other things that are just visually appealing pieces of the space, not necessarily kids play on structures. And so I will happily update this board and give tours whenever it's ready.
Describe it a little bit more for people who
Sure.
don't know what you're talking
So
about.
yes, so this space is when we moved into what was formerly Greenville Park Elementary School, it had a large media center space in the middle of the building, and it's an open building, and so you walk around it. Being an early childhood center, we don't need a media center space in the same way. We have books in every classroom, and we don't check out books to students like that. And so we partnered with the Minnesota Children's Museum, which we signed a contract with them 5 days before COVID lockdown, to help them design and install a vibrant play space in the middle here. And so we are slowly but surely coming through on that vision to have this space available for students in our building as another just a great feature for students to have. For young children, play is how you learn. It's how you create stories. It's how you imagine. It's how you learn and grow. And so this just, it adds to another space to be able to have students continue their growth in our building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. All right, next up is the site improvement or the continuous improvement plan for the Area Learning Center. Welcome, Daryl, Director of the ALC.
Hello,
Hi.
thank you. Hope I can get all this stuff in on here. All right. Jump right in. Strategic plan is the same as strategic plan, vision, preparing every student for lifelong success. For the strategic commitments, I have for my school improvement plan highlighted 4 of them through the goals that we'll talk through here in a moment. And then for the benchmarks, we do focus on 4 through 7 primarily. 5 and 6 have some age limits in there, but we at the ALC try to make a connection with a caring adult the entire time they're there. So even though it says middle school there, we embrace that one as well. And then also the next one for having a vision for the future by 8th grade, we embrace that one too, to have that vision for the future for our students as they graduate of what that next step is. So 4 through 7 are ones that we highlight quite often at the ALC. Some key reflections. So starting with last year, we had a couple goals that you've seen many years if you have been here a while of my learner outcome ones. Attendance and credit completion are pretty common for us. That's our 2 main focus areas year after year. We didn't make the goals for those 2, attendance and credit completion, but the good news is that we're trending in the right direction. You'll see that here in the data once we get into that. So we are heading that way. We were having a really good trend line before the pandemic, and then that kind of took us back a few years. And now we're hoping to repeat that trend line and get back on track. So that's where we're at with goals, which we'll get into here in a second. The ALC does continue to have a really strong sense of community. So I'm really happy to share some of the results of some of our surveys that we took. So we'll see that here in a moment too. For our goals of last year, the people goal, this one was a little bit missed the mark, to put it very kindly. So we had our goal was to have 20% of parents complete the survey so we could get more parent feedback. We just had 3% complete the survey. So that is an area that we want to continue to work on, which you'll see in the upcoming goals, just to try and get that parent engagement. So we have some plans on how to do that. But that was the first one that we did not get. The employee engagement's a little unique in that the goal that I had was centered around staff meetings. They changed the student survey. So then that question wasn't in there for last year. And so I don't have a pre and a post to compare to. So I just put in the employee engagement of 4.55. That was the highest score that we had of the employee engagement for any particular area. And that was the goal of, I believe that leaders in my immediate work environment are genuinely concerned for my welfare, which I was pleased to see that I try to care for people, and I'm glad that they recognize the care. The student experience, this is the one that I was really, not just me, but our whole staff, super excited about. So we had 100%, we have what's called an SEI, a student engagement instrument that we use. And so we give that 3 times a year, in the fall, in the winter, and the spring. And the students take that survey, and 100% of the students either agreed or strongly agreed with those statements of adults at my school listen to students. My teachers are there for me when I need them. At my school, teachers care about the students, and I feel safe at this school. So I'm super happy to see 100% of people, as I mentioned, have that strong sense of community. And the students definitely showed that through the survey results. Here are the learner outcome ones that I was mentioning before. So the top one is attendance. And when I changed this, it used to be, for those of you that have been here for a number of years, it used to be a very busy slide. So I got some feedback on making that a little less busy. And so the red line is the average. I've been keeping data since 2014, like soon when I first came to Northfield. And so I averaged 2014 through 2022, those years. So that's the red line is the average throughout all those years. And then the bars of the bar graph are the current year, the 22, 23 in this case. So the top one is attendance. The bottom one is average credit earned. So the top one, as you can see the data points up there, they range from 75 at the low point, and there's only one in the 70s. That was grading period 6. Up into the 84 is the high point. Our goal was to make 85% attendance rate. But as you notice, we didn't have any 85s. But the greens, the reason I highlighted those 2 green was that those 2 are above average. So the end of the year, we started to trend in the right direction where we're getting above average attendance, which was good to see. The bottom, same thing. Green is above average. The blue is below average. The red line is the average. And so credit completion, we had 5 out of the 8 grading periods where we were above average. So that's also trending in the right direction. More credits earned than on average. Didn't quite get our goal of 75%, but we're getting more than average, which is good to see too. So that's why I say they're trending in the right direction, above average, not quite at those goals that we set for ourselves though. Continuing on to equity, expand class, the cultural appreciation and communication of ideas. So we have a communication and culture class is what we call it, that does center around anti-racism, acceptance of other cultures. And so that's a class that we offered. This is our 2nd year offering that. We partnered with Regional Centers of Excellence, and they helped design that class a couple years ago. Really happy as we tried to get as many students through that class as possible. And the evolution of the class is really, really exciting to see. And so that class did continue last year and expand that. We got more students through there. We do have another equity goal that's related to that I'll talk about here in a second. And then our cultural meals, they're a community building event in which it starts that conversation of opening the experience to other cultures for some students that have never experienced other things like a sambusa before, which is my favorite food ever. If you ever get a chance, highly recommend. So just going through that conversation of, hey, this is our tradition that we do in our family. Oh, I've never experienced this before. And we had a lot of fantastic conversations at the tables. We just bring all the tables in the hallway and eat as one big group. And there's a lot of fantastic conversation starter that happened through that. Communication, we did start, we took a look at part of that parent engagement is that we didn't send a whole lot of messages out to parents. So we had 2 the previous year. And so we had 19 announcements this last year. So when we had cultural meals or we had events, getting that word out to parents and saying, hey, this is happening. And so we want to continue to expand that communication between parents and the school. And so we're heavily reliant on talking points, but other methods to just getting in touch with the parents as much as possible. Stewardship, it's in there just every time trying to make sure we have that positive budget, being fiscally responsible everywhere we can. And then partnerships, we did have the youth build, which continues to expand and grow. And you can see one of the pictures there. There's some students working in the process shed. I think it's technically called a shed out behind the building here that you may have seen. So that's going to become our outdoor space to work. And so some students were already working out there last year with building projects of different things. And so really excited to see that grow, that class. And then CAC, we had a partnership with a peer recovery specialist is what that position is, what we decided to end up calling that, for chemical use support. And so we added that partnership last year as well. For the 23-24 SIP goals, for the people, I already mentioned this, but we're going to stick with that 20% of parents, trying to get more parents to complete that survey to hear the feedback. We do have anecdotal evidence where I've had a lot of emails or a lot of parents give me positive feedback, but we just got to get that survey, get that wheel turning. So we're going to keep that goal, trying to get that engagement there. Learner outcomes, same thing. Mentioned those 2 we're going with and trying to get to that point. We did right before the pandemic. Actually, our attendance rate goal was 90% because we were consistently getting 85%. But then with that kind of pesky pandemic, put us back a couple years. So now we're building back on that. So we're back at 85%. And then the credit completion rate of 70% is where we're trying to get to. For equity, this is a new state required ethnic studies. It doesn't happen for a couple years, but we want to do that ASAP. And so we're going to try and create and implement that ethnic studies class. Because we have that communication and culture class that we've already started, the goal or the thought was to expand on that into the social studies area. Our English teacher right now teaches it through humanities curriculum. And so we wanted to bring that into social studies as well. And so now this is required, but it's a good way to bring in the social studies content into that ethnic studies class. And so that will help expand that communication and culture class just in a different avenue. And then communication, as I already mentioned, just trying to get the word out more of here's the things that are happening for families. And we've had some talk, which will continue here in workshop week, of other ways that we can get families engaged with different things that are happening at the ALC. Some of the action steps for people: use talking points, website, text messaging. We have a school cell phone that gets a whole lot of use. A lot of people prefer text messaging, so we do a lot of text messaging. Invite parents to community cultural meal type events, things like that. So we're going to try and bring in some parents for events that we have at the school. Learner outcomes, we continue to use the Hanover research. So Cheryl Matheson, several years ago, found this article on best practices for improving attendance. And we've used that kind of as our go-to. I have it right on my desk. It's just a fantastic research. And so we go through that very frequently just to see on ways and what we're doing, what we can do to increase the attendance and therefore increase credit completion. And so we're going to continue using that. I already mentioned the ALC director and social studies teacher will collaborate to create that ethnic studies class, and then we'll continue to offer those meals and other opportunities for students at the ALC. Oh, went too fast there. The goal progress monitoring plan. So we're unique in that we have 8 grading periods, so about 1 a month or so. And so in those 8 grading periods, once the students at the end of the grading period, the classes that they're passing, they get the credit, then we go to the next one and it restarts everything. And so it's short chunks instead of long extended times to maintain attendance and credits and grades and that kind of thing. So it really is a good strategy for the students that we work with. And so we have had that before I came here. But they do provide really good benchmarks too. So we're able to see attendance rates, and that's why I break it down every year: attendance rates, credit completion by grading period. So every 20 days or so, we're able to see where students are with credits, with attendance, with other things that we keep track of. And so it helps us monitor and adjust throughout the year, so we don't have to wait for the next year to make any big changes. We can do it throughout the year because we have a pretty good, a lot of data points. And then there's what it's all about, the graduation of last year. We do have a new tradition that's fairly new of signing the wall. So you can see behind the graduation picture, we have a student that painted Northfield ALC graduates. And then once they finish, they go and sign the wall on their last day. So it's a pretty cool community event that we get students to sign the wall and then come back and say, oh, I remember that. I just had the conversation with a student a couple weeks ago that came back from on the job training, came back and went through and checked out the signature and said, oh, it seems like such a long time ago, but it goes quick. So any questions?
Well, thank you, Daryl. That was terrific. Hey, Corey.
Thanks for being here, Daryl. Appreciate the report. Love the new graphs. They look great.
Oh, thank you.
for those. And also I want to publicly commend you and your staff and the students for creating the culture you do at the ALC. Obviously, it's just a phenomenal setting, and we see that every year. And I know for most of us, it's one of our favorite events of the year is seeing the ALC graduation. I do have a couple questions concerning the family engagement I want to tease out so I can better understand this.
Yep.
You interchangeably maybe use family engagement and parent engagement, and I know students at your school may not have, they may be of an age and living on their own, or they may have a different family dynamic. When you look at some of the data where you have 3%, are you including all what would be considered traditional homes, or how do you look at that data? Are you considering people who might have divorced parents and count 2 parents, 1 parent? Thinking if we can get that number lower so your percentage can go higher.
Yep. So you are correct in that we count everyone that's enrolled as a household, if you will. And so we do have quite a few students that are 18, 19, and so they enroll themselves and they're their own parent. They don't traditionally take the survey, and so that does inflate our denominator. So that would actually increase our percentage. It would be a good strategy.
Good about that?
Yeah, but I would like to be pretty sincere about making sure we reach as many families as possible. But yeah, for this calculation, it was everyone that was enrolled had that one family or one potential person to fill that out, if whatever that word is escaping me. I wish I could be very eloquent with that, whatever that word is, but anyway.
Well, I certainly appreciate the challenge that each building and student body and family present in terms of engagement. I know last year you had the same 20% goal. Last year you came in 11%, and I believe it was 9 families. Obviously a decline this year. I did see in your summary as well, you said you want to honor the families on the level of engagement they want to give. So I'm trying to understand how you can increase that engagement while clearly honoring the lack of engagement, the disengagement from the vast majority of families. And then with that, how you would expect to increase that number if you're using the same tools in the same way with talking points, texts, and emails.
Yep. So the purpose of the text, I think, is super important. And so instead of just giving out kind of generic information, it's going to be more invitations to, hey, come and check this out, or hey, we'd like to see, welcoming messages. So we're going to try and kind of extend the branch, if you will, to try and bring in some parents. It is a good point. It's in the narrative of honoring the engagement, because I have had some parents that they prefer that's they're an adult now, that's on them. Like, yeah, I don't need to get involved. And so I don't want to force them to get involved if they don't want to. But trying to just, at least they have the invitation. So whenever they want to get involved, or if they ever want to get involved, the invitation's there and they know that very clearly. So yeah, that balancing act, I'm kind of a little bit of philosophical kind of, I believe, when we're at the point, we'll know we're at the point of the parents that are willing to get involved are getting involved, and the parents that aren't there, and finding where that data point is. Right now, I don't know that data point, and it varies pretty dramatically from year to year. And even within the year, there's different times of the year where, some of the more students that are on their own register, and towards the springtime, there's some that say this fall and the spring that I just have a couple credits, I want to get this done. They enroll themselves. And so, so there's some nuances with the data that right now I'd like to tease that out and try and get a little more fine tune of where we're looking.
Thank you.
No. Anyone else have a question or comment? Amy?
Thank you, Daryl. It's always interesting to hear what you're doing with the ALC and the community that you're building there and the structure you put in place to help these students get through their high school. So my question is, they're all kind of related, so several questions. Ultimately, this is all to see the students graduate, and I'm wondering what the graduation rate looks like if it was affected by COVID and, and people's engagement because of COVID kind of disengaged everybody. And then also, I'm wondering if you ended up with more students coming into the ALC from the high school because of COVID too. So what effect did COVID have on the ALC, and what are the graduation rates looking like now?
Yep. So credit recovery has grown tremendously. And I thought it was going to be, a little bit sooner graduation or gradually decrease than it is. It's still pretty intense. And so just to give you an idea, we used to have about 40 to 60 students in summer programming years ago. And when the year after COVID, we had 400 students. And so we grew tremendously that year. Then the next year we went down to about 250 or so. And then this year I thought we were going to be down in the 150, like the gradual, but we were right at the 250 again. And so we're lower than we were at the peak, but we're not anywhere near what it used to be pre-pandemic. And so the credit recovery in the summer is pretty busy. There's a lot of students going through. And the good thing is there's a lot of students recovering the credits. So there's a lot of students that are taking that opportunity to recover that credit that they may have lost and get back on track. So that's been a big success story. Shout out to the credit recovery team that we have at the high school. That's another way that we're recovering some of those credits during the school year. So then they don't even have to go to summer. They get them sooner than later. The thought currently for our system and all systems really is to recover the credit as soon as possible. So instead of if you fail something in 9th grade, don't wait till your 12th grade year. Try and recover that as soon as possible after that failure. So you have some of that knowledge from the class that you can build off and finish that class. And so we've put some systems in place where that's happening. So that's really encouraging to see the credit recovery happening more and more, but also smarter and smarter each year, if that makes sense. So that's helping with our numbers. Our numbers are bigger than they used to be. So again, when I first got here, our numbers were in the 50s or so. Now last year we were pretty consistent in the 90s, mid 90s. And so we're really close to capacity as far as we try and keep that class size to 15 or fewer, because that's best practice for a long time for ALCs. So trying to keep that at 15 or fewer with 90 students, we were right there the whole year, but we were able to make it work. We were creative in keeping class sizes at that size, but getting as many students in the doors as we could. And so that's been successful. And right now we're about in the mid-50s for enrollment, which is not unusual for this time of year, because typically that first week or so, we jump up quite a bit. Last year it was unique in that we were in the mid-80s, like right away. Normally it starts at the 60, 70, and then we build into 80, 90 by the second or third grading period. Last year we were at mid-80s and then just went to mid-90s and kind of stayed there the whole year. And so that wouldn't surprise me if that happened again. There is a credit need for sure for a lot of students, and also just kind of the word of mouth. There's a lot of students that come in and say, yeah, I heard this is quality program, things are going great, so we want to try this out. So that's happened. I had a couple intakes this month, and that was the reason, is that they had positive feedback from someone. So that's also encouraging to hear, that the good word of the ALC reputation is extending. So that's good to see. Graduation rates. So there's a few different rates that you can use. The 4-year rate. So we were identified by ESSA for the 4-year graduation rate. There's a lot of push by a lot of people to try and get ALC's not 4-year rate, because that's what we're designed to do, is those students that are behind in credits come to the ALC, so they're all not on pace. And so, but in the greater wisdom of whoever, they decided not to change that. So it is still the 4-year rate. And so that's a tough measurement for ALCs to be measured by. So we normally go by the 7-year graduation rate, because then that's their 21st birthday is when they can no longer attend public school. And that would be the 7-year rate of, did they finish high school in general? And that we do have a pretty strong number. We're in the 70s for percent. 76 is last time I looked. And so pretty strong for 100% of the students that weren't expected to graduate. So we're very pleased to see that number as high as it is, to try and get as many students graduated as possible. Yep.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have a question or a comment? Okay, thank you so much, Daryl.
Thank you.
See you. All right, we're on to item C, and that is sharing our roots, a contract. We'll hear about a new grant for the community garden. This will be an item for individual action at the next board meeting. And who is presenting?
I will.
now? Hey.
All right. So this is a pretty straightforward lease agreement. Sharing Our Roots is helping manage the community garden. Right now, there's no water on site. So they have trucks that bring it in, and it's quite a bit of work for them to make sure that everything's watered appropriately. And so they were awarded a grant to basically install a separate water meter and have water run from our building. So they're paying for all of that cost. This contract is basically just saying the district won't incur any costs, and if we do, we're going to invoice them for it. And we will invoice them for whatever the actual usage is for the water based on our rates. It's a 5-year agreement. I think that's about it. It's really just continuing to be good partners with this organization and hopefully make it a little easier for them.
Okay, thank you, Val.
Yep.
Any other comments? Do you have any comments, Dr. Emma?
No, yes, I think that, no, but yes. One of our strategic amendments is partnerships. And I think that I would just encourage people to look at the community garden. So it's to the west of the NCEC. And when we did the upgrades to the NCEC fields in 2019, 2020, we expanded that community garden by about 30%. So it's not huge, but there is a tremendous amount of people in that neighborhood who walk to use that community garden. So it is really a community resource, as Val said, and we're really pleased to have this community partnership with Sharing Our Roots. Their focus is on community land share. So their focus is on providing immigrant populations with the ability to have an ag presence. And that's not something that is available to many people. So it's an innovative way to do it, and we're happy to be part of that.
Nice. Board members, any questions or comments? Jeff?
So essentially, that's our land. We're just renting it to them, and obviously they're paying their water bill, so we're monitoring the water.
Yeah, we don't even charge rent. It's just been
Okay.
there since
Long
forever.
time, yep.
Yeah, and then I mean,
So
I
this is
remember
just
way,
formalizing the water.
yeah, way back when that was always just vacant. There
Mhm.
was nothing there.
Yeah.
Just a quick question on what about safety within the, so do we have any liability then within the garden, or is that a separate issue as far as people getting hurt, or do they have that fenced off so that deer and other things, people, animals don't get in there and eat all their produce, or is that kind of their own deal?
I would say that's kind of their own deal. We are, oh,
Can we help you?
yes, please.
There is a fence around the garden, so that it's about a waist high fence around the garden. And I don't know that there's any plots available right now. They all appear used. They do actually let our building have one plot. So we've had a hand-in-hand class have a plot, and this summer an early ventures class has a plot as well. But there is a fence around. And then what has been happening is if you drive by, a large tub cistern that holds all the water, and some of the other gardening is in the city's ice shelter that's right next to next to the ECFE outdoor classroom as well.
So is there any, I mean, liability issue if somebody got hurt on that property, if we actually own it, that they could come back?
I would say potentially. To my knowledge, we've never had that happen, so we'll knock on wood, but it is our property, so I would say technically we're probably liable, but well, actually, I do think I have liability language.
There's a
in
couple
this
of
agreement.
liability sections in the lease agreement.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
they're required to have general liability insurance, so. Like, so prior to this agreement, probably, but this should hopefully tie that up.
Thank you.
Yep. Good questions. Anyone else? Question or comment? Ben, do you have a question or comment?
I don't. Thank you.
Thanks, Val. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item, which is the LMR media contract. Dr. Hillman will present an updated advertising contract, and this will be an item for individual action at the next board meeting.
So the contract that we have for your consideration at the next board meeting is actually really a very similar contract to what we had you approve earlier this year. The key thing is that we started this process with LMR Media to help us look at advertising opportunities within the district under the new district policy that we adopted within the last couple of years around naming rights and some things like that. Due to just the busyness of the spring and some other pieces, we haven't yet gotten a ton of traction with that yet. The district is not paying anything on this contract to begin with. It's solely a commission-based contract. So if Lance, who is the owner of LMR, when he is able to help us learn how to sell this advertising, he will take a cut of it. It's a 15% commission. So really there's no, it's a real help to us. We don't know how to price out, for example, what do you charge for advertising on the swimming scoreboard? I don't know the answer to that, but this is Lance's area. He's able to help us with it. Lance also is really behind Northfield Live, which has done a great job of promoting our students through streaming a number of our activities. And so we've got a good relationship with this organization, and this contract is just really we're hoping to start to get some traction this fall. So we just need to update the contract.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions for Dr. Hillman? None? Okay, very good. Thank you. Now we are on item E, which is the potential grant writer. And Dr. Hillman, can you update us on that item?
Yes, so I'm just going to review very briefly, very similar to what I shared at the last meeting. Since I published this for you last week, we've had one development that happened over the weekend that I want to share with you. So we've talked with you about the hundreds of millions of dollars that are available in competitive grants just through the latest round of legislation in the 2023 Minnesota legislature. So we know that there's a number of competitive grants. And if we believe that a grant writer could be very helpful to our district in getting those grants, and also giving our existing professional staff the ability to focus on the execution of the things that are within those grants. One thing that I think is instructive to us is that we did do a survey of some school districts to find out, do you have a grant writer? If so, what do you pay them? And we did a very large sample size and got one response. So we know that some larger metro districts, have their own full-time grant writers, but we know districts about our size, this is something that they're also looking into now. And if we have a person who this is their role, this is what they do, we know that we can charge some of the administrative costs of the grant to be able to cover the salary and benefits for the grant writer. We think this puts us in a really great position, not only around the MDE pieces, but we would expect this position to seek other competitive grants. And I know several board members have shared with me other grants that they think would align with our strategic plan. To be clear, this position wouldn't be saying, boy, that looks fun, but it not related to our strategic plan. We're not going to chase grants. We're looking for grants that would help accelerate toward our district benchmarks. So I've shared with you the different options that we had thought about. I shared about with that at the last board meeting. We had landed on looking at it a half-time grant writing position to start the fall. Over the weekend, I was contacted by Northfield Healthy Community Initiative. They recently had their grant writer who resigned, and they have an interest in potentially braiding what was their part-time grant writer and this part-time grant writer to have a full-time grant writer serving both HCI and the school district. And we know that over the years, we've had an excellent partnership with HCI. Because we have that unique partnership, it's an automatic community partner. So it really helps us be much more competitive with our grant application. So we just literally started talking about it today. So I will have that for you at the next meeting, what that would look like. We did some research on publicly available data around what are the average grant writers paid in Minnesota. 3 or 4 different public sites indicate it's between that $67,000 and $77,000 per year for a full-time. So at a half-time, we were looking at a salary of around $35,000. By the time you add the maximum total cost of potential benefits, it'd be just above $50,000. If we did something in partnership with HCI, we'd have to work out, would we be the contract holder? Would HCI be the contract holder? Would they bill us? Would we bill them? So we'll work those things out in the next couple of weeks. But one thing that we know from past experience is that when you do have that community partnership, when you're applying for grants, you get more points on the grant application, and we can point to a number of successful pieces in the past when you had that formal relationship. So there was some real positive feedback from the board at the last meeting. We had landed on starting at a halftime with the ability to, of course, increase it. Should we see that we're starting to get traction there, we thought start on the lower end so we can have as close to a guarantee of being able to fund the position from the grant funds themselves. That's what the goal is. We'll continue to explore this partnership with HCI this week and bring that to you as an option as part of the August 28th meeting. So I appreciate the board's support in considering this. I do think this is going to put us in a position we're able to secure some of these funds, and it's going to take some of the pressure off existing staff who are trying to execute the strategic plan and be able to work with someone who's gonna be able to not only do the writing of the grants, but also the reporting on the grants, which sometimes can be the more onerous part of it.
Thank you for that update. Are there any comments or questions from board members? Okay, Jenny.
Thanks, Claudia. And thank you, Dr. Hillman, for the summary. I noticed in the printed summary, you had mentioned that the grant writer would be concerned with the Minnesota legislature grants. Would this individual also be able to fulfill some of the applications for the federal
Yes.
grants? Okay, through the Federal Department of Education.
Absolutely. Not even beyond that. If there are other foundations, we would expect them to be proactively seeking any kind of grant funding that would help us accelerate our achievement on our benchmarks.
And then where would those directives come from?
I'm sorry,
Where would the directive come from? I mean, will we have a team that will kind of assist? Or will this grant writer just take it from their own initiative?
Great question. So the way I envision it is that the grant writer, one of the reasons that I think it's important to have the grant writer as an employee is that they are part of our organization, right? They are seeing the connections between what is happening at the early childhood center and the middle school, for example. They're seeing all of those different connections. So as they're seeing the grants that become available, the first question would be, would the grant align with our strategic plan? And if we believe that it would, then we would work with the administrators in those areas. So let's say it's something that's focused on middle school age students. The grant writer, in conjunction with myself, with middle school principal Greg Giallino, and probably Hope Langston, depending on what the grant is for, we would look at, is this grant meet our needs? Is it the kind of thing that would help us achieve the goals and the benchmarks that we've set? And then we would, of course, all grants end up coming before the board. Val will be involved. If there's staffing involved, it would be Molly. So we would involve the appropriate administrators, but the board, of course, would need to approve even the application of any grant once it is brought in. So Val, do you want to talk about that process a little bit? Because you'll see we do have grants that come through in the consent grouping, but just describe how that process works now.
Yep. So there is a grant policy that governs how we apply for grants. So I have to approve all grants before anyone would apply for them. And anything that's over 15,000 actually needs board approval as well before they can apply. So actually not before they apply. Sometimes the deadlines are a little convoluted and short-timed, but we make sure that the board sees it before we would accept any funds if we were awarded. So that's how it works right now. So I do review all of them. And again, looking for all the things that Dr. Hillman said. Does it match with our strategic commitments? Does it make sense? Are there things that would add expense that they hadn't considered? So I'm checking through all that kind of stuff right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you both.
Any other questions, comments? Amy?
I can see the advantages of partnering with HCI in this approach. My concern is, I think there's a lot of both HCI, I mean, they survive on grants, and we're hoping there'll be a lot of grants out there. How do we make sure a full-time person is equally divided between the two organizations?
I don't have the answer for you today with that. Typically, when we have shared positions like that, we do have people do a time study, right? What percentage of your time is coded to various areas. So when we have people who do more than one position, we will often look at that kind of time study. The other part that I think with any potential HCI partnership is a lot of times we both have the same mutual goal. And HCI may be providing some of the services outside of the school that lend themselves to the academic benchmark or the social emotional benchmark that we're seeking. We are able to provide those items within school, and then HCI, because of their ability to access the community or to work in the community, they are traditionally doing a lot of those things outside of school. So I can't say it would be 50-50. In fact, in some cases, in 100% of some grants, it could be that it's mutually beneficial to both of us.
Corey?
Well, that's certainly an interesting development and a good one at that. I was ready to come here and advocate for a full-time position because we know we have a very limited window with hundreds of millions of dollars available. And certainly there may be a runway into the future for this position to be sustained by its own revenue it gains. But I think partnering with HCI is a good option because they have, a long record of doing good things for kids in this community. And to Amy's point, I kind of look at it that way too, as I was thinking through it, since you just announced it, that even if it doesn't directly impact any of the monies earned that may go to HCI, doesn't directly impact our schools, there is an effect because they're kids in our community. And, Aaron just talked about kindergarten readiness and the difference between our own preschool versus some of the other ones and where kids or if they went into preschool at all. And HCI impacts kids from birth to careers. So I'm certainly interested in hearing more about how this might develop. I realize it's probably something you have to work on quickly because it's going to be hot and heavy as soon as some of these grants open up and there's going to be competition. So
yeah, our only saving grace right now is there's so many of them, they don't have all the rules written yet. So we have a little bit of a breather, but to Jenny's point too, I mean, our Minnesota legislature was the impetus for saying, we think we could get something that we could pay for from existing funds. But it isn't just about the state legislature component. So if we think about HCI and Northfield Promise, we've had a tremendous amount of funding come into the community that has directly affected kids through our work with the Strive Together network. And literally, millions of dollars that have come in that support students throughout the community. We have other examples of in the early childhood area. We had a great example several years ago of the partnership between the district and HCI to fund the Mother Goose curriculum grants that provided in-home daycares with a vetted curriculum that they could use with their children in their home daycare. And we saw positive results from that as well. So I think it does go to that part that we're all working together. We have a specific charge of academic development and social emotional development during the school day. But anytime we can have that wraparound services with the community, we know that everybody wins.
Dr. Hillman, did you say if the position that was just vacated was part-time or full-time?
I don't know the answer to that.
In my point, I was gonna make about full-time position is someone who's dedicated to that as a full-time position. It's more of attractive position. You have a broader pool of candidates and potentially more expertise. Not always the case, of course, especially in this community, but I think having a full-time position is more attractive and potentially can bring in stronger candidates.
Anyone else? Ben, do you have a question?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hillman. All right, and now we are at item F, the proposal to maintain the 7-period day at the Northfield Middle School. Dr. Hillman and middle school principal Greg Gelano will present.
So I'm going to start and turn it over to Greg here a little bit, but so what we know is that in the spring, when we went through our budget reduction process, the board did approve the shift from a 7-period day to a 6-period day. And the reason that that was recommended by administration is that at that time, we felt that was the best strategy that we had available to maintain as many different departments as possible and still achieve the FTE reduction target that was assigned to the middle school. As many people at this table said, it was the least worst option that we had at that time. We don't just keep moving forward based on what the old rules were, and when dynamics change, we look at things and we continue to try to be as creative as we can be. I'm going to have Mr. Gelano explain what took place and why the dynamics are different today than they were just a couple of months ago. And we've already implemented one of the changes that would be part of this, but we are going to recommend to you that on August 28th that you vote to approve us maintaining the 7-period day beyond the 23-24 school year rather than shifting to the 6-period day. So Greg, would you just talk about the new dynamics that changed after the end of the school year that allowed us to come to this place?
Sure. So there was two pieces that happened. Both happened to be with geography in 8th grade, and one had to do with the retirement. So after the board, after great discussion and getting feedback from our community and our students and stuff, I think made a solid decision based on the information we had. But after that time, we had a staff member decide to retire, a geography teacher in 8th grade. At the same time, the geography teacher who retired and the remaining geography teacher had collaborated and came up with a proposal that they presented to me, again, after the decision had already been made, requesting that geography go from an everyday all year class for students to being an everyday semester class. What that would do FTE wise is it would mean that the teacher that retired, we would not have to rehire to hire a second geography teacher, which is what we've done for this year. We did not hire a second geography teacher. We'll only have one. It'll be a semester class. I will let you know that both Dr. Hillman and I, as we talked, we put kind of impetus on the remaining geography teacher, Daryl Sawyer, to say, the only way we can back this is that there's a few conditions that have to happen that you have to prove to me you can pull off. And one is you have to be able to meet the geography standards. And two, you have to maintain the good things that our students just love about our geography class. It can't be just, we're just going to hit the basic geography standards and kind of a cookie cutter type thing. It has to remain with that integrity. I knew he could do it because I've been in his classroom many times. He's a very dynamic teacher, so he wouldn't be asking this if he couldn't do that. But he went back and he literally came to me. We set up a meeting and he had bookmarked every single geography standard in an outline that he had planned for the semester. And he went above that, saying that he was actually extremely excited to do this. You have access to all students in eighth grade instead of just half. And he felt that he knows that he can keep the stuff that students really get excited about, and some things maybe they don't get excited about, but he was able to take some of the standards and kind of combine them into units. And he mapped out the whole thing for me. At that point, I was sold, saying, all right, you've done your homework, you've taken the time, you've vetted this. I think it's worth pursuing this option. At the same time, then, thinking cap goes on after listening to our families, listening to all of you, listening to our students and our staff on how, as we've always said, going forward, that the 6-period day was the best option we had at that time, but we made it really clear that it was a budget decision. If we weren't, excuse me, weren't in a position to have to do a budget reduction, we would not have proposed a 6-period day. Keeping that in mind, with this geography having, our goal, remember, was a $200,000 reduction at the middle school. That took care of $100,000. By keeping in the 6-period day, if you remember, we were going to go from from 2 writing teachers down to 1 and make a writing in every other day class. The new kind of proposal that we have is that we still do that, even though it's a 7-period day. So that would get you that extra. Again, after this year, we remain status quo for this year. We would go from 2 6th-grade writing teachers down to 1 6th-grade writing teacher. And that class would go to an every other day, all year class. So that 1 teacher would see the entire 6th-grade class. And thus getting the $200 mark or target that we had. Couple things that also does, some I'll call kind of bonus to this, is after listening to our families and students, it was very clear, many of you commented that electives were a high priority to our families and students. They wanted options. By doing this, 8th grade geography going to a semester class, it actually opens up some space in an 8th grade schedule, which was lacking, so that a student actually can take an additional elective. Similarly, in 6th grade, by doing that with writing and keeping the 7-period day, it also opens up a space for some possible options for an elective in 6th grade, which actually 6th grade, other than a music or Amistades, 6th graders didn't have an elective option. So they would actually now have the option to do that. Question comes up, how do you do that without adding FTE? It's 100% based on our enrollment. With our enrollment decreasing, if you're going from a little over 300 students in a class down to 270, 280, it allows a teacher, an elective teacher who maybe had 10 sections to go down to 9 and then offer an additional section, thus a new elective. So that's how you kind of play the little bit of a shell game. But again, it's based on decreasing enrollment, which we're seeing that play out this year with our 6th and 7th grade. That's kind of the gist of it. Again, it was the main piece that kind of got the wheels turning was generated from staff, specifically our geography teachers.
So we're bringing this to you tonight for you to be able to hear the latest thinking. And again, as Greg pointed to the series of events that got us here. So again, we're paying attention to the things that we learned during the budget reduction process. We're able to execute those because of some things that we weren't able to know at the time. So we think this is a positive development, and we are going to recommend that we maintain the 7-period day. The semester of geography, 8th grade, we have been able to adjust class length and sizes and every other day. Those kinds of things are things that the administration has done for a number of years. But we had asked you to take that specific action about the 7-period day to the 6-period day. And we need you to take an action to make sure that we have the authority not to go to that. So this is why we're bringing this proposal to you today. Again, that wouldn't have taken effect for another year. I want to point out that saving some additional dollars through attrition, and I think as a licensed social studies teacher, geography, I had to ask those questions about, are we able to make sure that we're able to meet all of those standards? I agree, Mr. Sawyer is an exceptional teacher, and I have great confidence in his curriculum planning ability. So I think this goes to show the strategic commitment that we have to stewardship is about more than just the people at this table, right? It's about also the people in our classrooms and our buildings who are seeing an opportunity and saying, this could work. Maybe this would help us in some way, shape, or form. So we're realizing some of the savings even a year earlier than what we would have anticipated. So we think there's a lot of good in this story, and we're going to ask you for your approval on August 28th. We'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Hey, Jenny.
Thank you, Greg, for the information. This sounds like a great idea, and I'm really thankful that you were able to work with the teachers and come up with this idea. I just have a question. Are all eighth graders required to take geography?
Yes. So they still are. They just don't get the semester and they go opposite health. So what happens is health is currently has been an every other day all year class, which to be honest is really kind of taxing on our health teachers. It has been for quite some time because the curriculum is so heavy. So now health would go to an everyday class for a semester. So you're at a semester time, they're only seeing half the students, which is much more manageable for that classroom teacher versus every other day all year.
Okay, so then every eighth grade geography student would have a whole semester opened up?
What it does is geography, if you think of it, took one whole hour. So what that does is, and health and FIAD were paired together. So what we did is we paired together health and geography, which opens up an every other day slot. Equivalent to semester, but we don't really have other than those two semester classes, but it opens up an every other day spot to take an art, maybe taking a second music or a STEM class.
Okay, I understand now. And so then with those electives, would it just sort of then go back to the default electives that you would have offered those eighth grade students anyway?
We actually, because we knew we were going to do the geography ahead of time, so I met with our elective teachers before the year was out. Kind of explained kind of the scenario with geography, saying I really could use some extra elective options. So we are offering in FIAD a lifetime activities elective. So a student could take the regular FIAD as well as a lifetime activities class. And then in art, we offered a media art class, a section of that, and a couple of sections of drawing and painting as additional elective options for students to take. I will say that we prioritize specific students, and we sent a message to all students, but we really prioritize students that didn't have a music or Amistades. The reason being is as soon as geography did that, those students that don't have music and Amistades would end up with 2 study halls in a day, and I'm not okay with that. So we gave them priority, but that doesn't mean once we made sure everyone had that and only a maximum of 1 study hall a day, then we could backfill with other students that still were interested.
Okay, so those newer electives that you just mentioned, those would not be offered this coming.
They
those
are,
not-
they actually are offered
Oh, they
this
were
year.
offered,
Yeah,
okay.
because we knew with the geography moving this year, I needed to have that option. And it, again, it has to do with the decreased enrollment in 6th and 7th grade that I was able to just not need. I needed a little bit extra piece, but other than that, we were able to still offer.
Okay, thank you.
And to be clear, those electives were not things that were available when students registered last spring.
Correct.
So Mr. Jeleno emailed all 8th grade families early July, I think it
Yeah,
was,
I think it was.
to be able to let them know about this. And then they had an opportunity to connect and sign up for those courses as Mr. Jeleno described, but it wasn't part of the regular registration process. It was an additional part that was put on in July once we were confident we could move forward with the geography piece.
Correct.
Any other comments or questions? Me.
Thanks for this update. I'm very excited that this possibility is opened up, and I wanted to just let you know that I'm thankful that you really work with the teachers and all of the teachers, it sounds like, and came up with a plan and were able to facilitate it happening this year, because I'm sure that July email to all the 8th grade families caused a lot more work for you to have to deal with and your staff. So thank you for all of this.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else? Jeff?
Yeah, thanks for getting that done. That's some creative thinking and kind of calling an audible at the line of scrimmage. So glad you got that done. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Ben, do you have any questions, comments?
Just a quick question and thanks. I'd echo the thanks of the other board members. So we talked about just some potential savings for this year. Do we know what that will represent, relative to the 200 that we talked about for the coming year?
I can answer that. It will be more than, so when we are calculating savings or what an FTE costs, obviously we don't know at the time when we're hiring what amount of experience a person will come in, how many credits that they might have, what degrees they might have. So Val Murderstorff and Molly Wieselman have done an analysis, and typically we will bring in a new teacher on average at the master's lane, the 6th step. So that is the number that we have used over time, which is the roughly $100,000 target that we have used in a number of estimates. When a teacher, I'm not going to get into the specific details, but when you have a veteran teacher retire who has been with us for a long time and has amassed the number of credits, then you are realizing a savings that is more than $100,000. I don't have that specific number for you right now, Ben. What I can tell you is it will be more than what the estimated $100,000 in savings would be when we base it on a generic MA6 FTE.
Okay, that's great. Helpful. Appreciate it.
Great. Robert?
Well, thank you, Principal Galliano, for continuing to look at new opportunities and bringing this forward. As a historian, I, of course, alarm bells ring hearing a cut to social studies. But I recognize that there's a plan in place and we feel that we can still provide the same curriculum. As I just encourage that we carefully watch the academic effects. If the board chooses to take this approach, that we carefully watch the effects of losing that semester of geography, losing everyday writing. These are hard to follow because these are not things that are tested and on our standardized testing necessarily, but they are important skills. So we need our students to still learn.
I'll comment twice too. Ironically, I have a geography major. So I do have that lens and obviously I have a passion for that because I got one of my degrees happened to be in geography. So I agree with you, which is why I kind of held Mr. Sawyer's feet to the fire a little bit, saying you got to prove it to me if I'm going to be able to bring this forward type of thing. The second piece has to do with the writing. Talking with Hope Langston, and we know it fits, is writing can't look the same. That's really not a realistic ask. But our English language art class or courses are on a search cycle, a curriculum cycle. So it's actually good timing to talk about, okay, are there some of the writing standards that maybe can be implemented in those reading classes that remain, instead of all falling on that one writing teacher, as well as social studies, to be honest with you, because there's just some opportunities. So we still have some work to do and some planning to do at the middle school with their 6th grade teachers on what this is going to look like, and the English teachers in general at the middle school as they go through their curriculum cycle to have that discussion. So there's no details ironed out. I will say that it does offer up opportunities maybe to add some skill development, whether it be along the Avid lines or just in general skills that 6th graders need. So there are some positive opportunities there's a lot of positive opportunities to come from this, but this is, I like looking at things glass half full, that, okay, let's take advantage of this and see what we can do to even build a stronger program in 6th grade, and that'll benefit all of the middle school.
Good. Okay, Corey?
I echo many of the comments of other board members, and I look forward to voting in favor of this in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Comments or questions? Okay, thank you, Principal Galliano.
Thank you.
Okay, this will be an item for individual action at our next board meeting. We are on to item 6, the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to the grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? No. Okay, is there motion to approve the consent grouping?
So moved.
Moved by Corey, second by Robert. Okay, Anita, will you help facilitate a vote?
Aye.
Coleman,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item number 7 is our items for individual action. We have 2 items and we'll also have that vote, roll call vote. The first item is the policy committee recommendations. Note that there is a correction and the details are in the table file. I'll take a motion first and then we can discuss. Is there a motion to approve the recommended updates to policy 520.1, 805, and the 2023-24 student citizenship handbook? Moved by Robert, second by Jenny. Thank you. Dr. Hillman, do you want to make any comments?
The only comment that I'll make is just around, I appreciate the board's patience in our approval of the student citizenship handbook. Normally, we approve that usually in June, and we just have taken additional time to do so to make sure that we've gotten everything that we could from the legislative changes. While we are confident that based on what we know today, those changes have been integrated, we also are hearing each week some additional takes, or just even recently with something unrelated to the student citizenship handbook, there was a change in some other legislation due to a court case. So with all of the work that happened in this legislative session, we're confident that we have the handbook where it needs to be today. But I also just want to be transparent that as we roll this out during the year and as other districts roll out these changes in legislation, we may need to come back with other modifications. But we appreciate everyone's work, specifically Anita Ozzy's work on this, our principals who have reviewed it and feel it's in a good position to help them execute it at the building level. And we're pleased to get this taken care of tonight.
Very good, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion. Anita, will you facilitate a vote?
Butler,
Aye.
Coleman,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Your motion passes. All right, item B is the Benjamin Bus contract terms for 2023 through 2025. Is there a motion to approve the transportation contract extension with Benjamin Bus for the time frame August 1, 2023 through July 31, 2025, as presented at the July 10, 2023 board meeting? Moved by Amy, second by Corey. Okay, are there any, do you have any comments?
I don't have any comments. Val, do you have any?
Okay, any questions or comments by the board members? Okay, Anita, will you facilitate a roll call vote?
Butler,
Aye.
Coleman,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Anita. All right, item 8 is our items for information. We have a staff breakfast and program. Board members are welcome. It is when we welcome back the staff for the new school year. It will take place on Monday, August 28th at 7 a.m. to 10:15 at the middle school. And again, board members are invited to join. Item B is our 2023-24 e-learning plan, and Dr. Hillman will present that e-learning plan.
Yes, so when we adopt the calendar, the board has adopted the e-learning day strategy as part of the calendar. And then because we want to be as transparent we can, each year we present the e-learning day guidelines for parents and students, usually right around this time. The plan that we have this year is similar to the plan that we had last year. If you look at last year's plan and this year's plan, there's a lot of similarities. Based on, we had an unusual winter last year, right? In terms of just having some record amount of snowfall in the area, prompting a number of cancellations. You all know there's only one optimal number of cancellations for me, and that is 0. But sometimes Minnesota weather requires us to do that. I was pleased to hear Paul Douglas say that this looks like it might be a winter where there is less snow than normal. So we hope that that is correct. But one of the pieces of feedback we got from parents toward the end, some parents toward the end of the winter, I think we were just all tired from the winter, was around making sure that people understood that if they did not want their students to participate in e-learning day activities, they have that option. No different than when we run school on a day where someone may perceive the roads to be not safe enough for their children to come to school, they can call into the school office and say, I don't think it's safe enough to have school today. My kid is not coming to school. We excuse that absence. This is the reverse of that. So if there's an e-learning day that is called and a parent says, I just can't do this today, they can call their school. It's an excused absence and would be treated in that same way. Again, last year we asked this board to take a special action because of our status as an online learning provider that was approved by the state. When we had used our 5 e-learning days, we were preparing, should we need to use more, that our online learning program approval status would have allowed us to do so. Thankfully, we didn't need to use any more at that point. There's been some change in legislation that we are trying to learn. Now, every school in the state is an approved online learning provider for their own students and their enrolled students. We're asking, is that going to be the same this year? But we really would only ever want to use those 5 days if needed. And so you'll notice that I've removed any reference to the additional online days that we had modified the program mid-year, because if we're in that kind of winter, I think it's appropriate for the superintendent to come to the board, explain where there's a measure of accountability with that. And there's also the opportunity for us to say, how would we handle it in that year? So we're right now, what the plan says is that we'd have 5 days, and that again, if schools are able to provide online instruction to students at their discretion, that the board potentially could authorize additional online learning days if necessary. I have asked MDE if that's going to be the rule this year, now that everyone is an approved online learning provider. I have not heard back yet from them, but they had pledged to get back to me very soon, because we'd rather talk about this now than in February. So we are moving ahead with our e-learning plan. We'll start to get this out to families at the beginning of the school year. We had a work team this summer that came in and worked specifically on the elementary activities associated with. So we are prepared. We are prepared for a pretty substantial winter, but hopefully it's like the blanket in my car that if I have it, we won't need it, right? That's what the goal would be. So I share this with you so that you have an opportunity to ask questions, and we'll again start communicating this right at the beginning of the school year.
Okay, thank you. And that plan appears in the school calendar, is that correct?
The reference to the plan is in the school calendar. So when the board adopts the school calendar, it used to be that we would identify what were the makeup days at the end of the year, should we go beyond 2 cancellations. When we shifted in 2019 to using e-learning days, we've shifted the language on the calendar to say that we'll use e-learning days in place of making up school days after what would have been the end of the school year.
Thank you. Board members, any questions or comments about the e-learning plan? Okay, thank you. Item 9 is our future meetings. Those are Mondays in this boardroom at 6 p.m. They are August 28th, September 11th, and September 25th. At this time, we're going to move into a closed session for our labor negotiation strategy. This meeting will be closed as permitted by Minnesota Statute 13D.03 to discuss labor negotiations. Is there a motion to enter into this closed session? Moved by Robert, second by Corey. Okay, Anita, will you take a roll call vote?
Butler,
Aye.
Coleman,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Quinnell.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes.